I tended to find myself in a lot of situations in leadership spaces, leading teams or in leadership rooms where I was looking to other people to show me how to lead. And a lot of that looked like being louder, being more aggressive, being dominant in those situations. And what I found is I can play that game, but I don't like it. I don't like myself, and I don't like what happens in that process. And so I kind of for the past couple of years have been on this journey of figuring out what does it look like to be a sensitive person who wants to be unapologetically ambitious. And that's really how Badass Softie came about.
This week on the Using the Whole Whale podcast, he couldn't stay away, and he's back. Dr. J.J. Peterson, who joined us last time. He is the professor in residence at StoryBrand now, and also has a brand new podcast, the Badass Softie. And I'm excited to explore a bit more about this concept of Badass Softie, which I was informed nothing to do with soft serve ice cream. So, color me lost.
No,
Where are we?
A little bit of the story in that, but hey, maybe we get a rebrand later. I like it.
Can you explain what a Badass Softie is? I feel like that is where we need to start.
Yeah. So
also, hello.
Hi, how are you, by the way? Yeah, Badass Softie really comes from this idea that, I think for me, I'll just start with myself. I'm a fairly sensitive person. If you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 2, which is not kind of the traditional leader. A lot of the people who are in that space are driven and aggressive. And I tended to find myself in a lot of situations in leadership spaces, leading teams or in leadership rooms where I was looking to other people to show me how to lead. And a lot of that looked like being louder, being more aggressive, being dominant in those situations. And what I found is I can play that game, but I don't like it. I don't like myself, and I don't like what happens in that process. And so I kind of for the past couple of years have been on this journey of figuring out what does it look like to be a sensitive person who wants to be unapologetically ambitious. And that's really how Badass Softie came about, because I want to make big moves in the world. I want to be top of class in everything that I do. I want to make a lot of money. I want to change the world with working with nonprofits, but also don't want to lose my soul in the process. And so I started doing research around people who are sensitive succeed in leadership and in changing the world. And that's kind of how Badass Softie came about.
So I guess at the face of it, I don't know if I agree with this idea that ambition is on the other side of empathy or kindness. Can you help me understand that dichotomy as you see it?
Yes, I would agree with you. I don't think it is on the opposite side. I think that a lot of times where we are given models of people who are like, all right, well, if you're going to be a leader, you're not there to make friends. Like you hear that phrase, or you say, in order to be a leader, you need to be brutally honest. I don't think brutally honest is a compliment for people. And so we have these ideas of what it means to kind of be in charge and lead a team. And you're not there to please everybody. We have those kind of phrases in our heads about leadership. And I don't think that they have to be dichotomous. I don't think that they are separate. In fact, the research shows that when you actually put those together, when you are kind, when you have a high emotionally, you have an IEQ, then you actually accomplish more as a leader and as a team than without that. But a lot of people, I think, don't know how to do that well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the people pleaser really rings, right? I think people listening being like, all right, where am I on, you were talking about these like 9 types of, or is your driver a fear, a superpower, watch out? Are you somebody who is, playing one of these games? And I feel sometimes as a leader that it's not one thing always. And I wonder how that maps to this concept of, on one side, we have got somebody who is complete people pleaser, all passion over here, and is almost allergic to saying, here's my grand ambition, or here is how we want to take over the world, which is, oh gosh, we're not here to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what happens, I'll speak for myself in this, is that I think there were times that I felt like those two things had to be separate. And what I've learned is a lot of that, to be very honest, is more of a dance than opposites. Like the idea of, can you be clear and kind in communication? I think there are times when you're a leader that clarity and being a bit more direct has to rise to the top. It's not an either or, it's a kind of both and. I think there are other times in communication where kindness has to rise a little bit, but they don't always have to be on opposite ends of it. I think that when you're looking at these kind of the badass softie and the different styles of leadership, that really it becomes more of a dance. Then it becomes of I have to lead like this or I have to lead like this. I do think sometimes it's one a little bit heavier on the other, but really it more becomes a dance of leadership and integrating those things versus allowing them to always be one way or another.
I find it's pretty easy to be ambitious when the wind is at your back. It's pretty easy to be on a team that is winning the game. And I wonder if, when left to its own devices, we find ourselves more in this sort of, oh gosh, when times get tough, let's get passive.
Yeah, I would say that when times get tough is actually when I get a bit more aggressive. I get more rooted in my purpose and what I'm trying to accomplish. For me as a leader, this all kind of, we talked last time I was on the podcast a bit about kind of story and how story works and the role you play as a business or a leader in the story. And the idea behind that really is that whatever message you're communicating out there, your audience or your customers are the hero of the story, and you're the guide. The guide shows up to help the hero win the day in any movie. Yoda, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Dumbledore, Aslan, those are guides who are not, the story isn't about them, but they show up to help the hero win. And a couple of the principles, just as a reminder about what it means to be a guide, is that the guide is the strongest character in the story. The only reason they exist in the story is to help the hero win. And the way that they show up to help the hero win is with empathy and authority. So empathy meaning that they understand the pain that the hero is going through, and authority is they have the confidence, the skills, the tools, the experience to help the hero win as well. When we're talking about this from a leadership perspective, and when you're talking specifically about when things get hard, one of the things that I have to remind myself, or I want to remind myself when I show up in those seasons, is that even if I'm just a solopreneur, my job is to be a guide. And my job is to help other people win. Specifically, in my case, a lot of that is marketing, it's leadership principles, all of those kind of things. If I then, when things get hard, shrink in my own confidence in what I'm capable of bringing to the table, I am actually not serving other people well. I am not serving the heroes well in the story. Whether that's on my team or my customers or anybody out there that's listening, if I tend to get shy and shrink, I'm not doing myself service, but I'm also not doing anybody else service. I have to stand in my authority. And let me give you a specific example of where this happened for me. I was invited in to speak at a workshop for a company that they purchased smaller companies or companies that were around 10 million. So not small, but they were purchasing companies around 10 million and working to grow them to around 100 and sell them. The way that they would grow them is by headhunting these high-end executives and bringing them in to help grow, and then those executives got part of the revenue when they sold. When I say high-end, what I mean is in this room was going to be the former vice president of Walt Disney, the founder of Shutterfly, the former CEO of Xerox. So some of the most recognizable, most profitable companies in the world. And as I got there the night before, I was kind of mingling with some people, and each one of them came up to me and said something to the effect of, well, hope you teach me something tomorrow. I'm an expert in story. I've studied story my whole life. I don't know if this is going to work, but hey, we'll show up. Another guy even said, I'm an expert in story, so I actually planned some calls during your talk because I think I can get some tips, but I'm not going to be there. One of them said, this is the most expensive room you're ever going to be in. And that's all the night before I'm about to speak. I show up the next day. The person who hired me comes over to me and hands me the microphone as they're introducing the morning and says, we spent a lot of money to have all these people here and to have you here. I really need you to make it worth it. For the first time in my life, I grabbed the microphone and my hand just started shaking. I was uncontrollably shaking because I was so nervous and I was so amped up. And I did a couple different things. The first thing is I had heard Carson Daly talk about how he has anxiety, and the way that he gets rid of some of his anxiety physically is he squeezes his hands together for 10 seconds. So I paused, I squeezed my hands together as hard as I could for 10 seconds. The second thing I did is stop and just kind of realize, hey, this is a gift for the people who are in the room, as in the company paid for me to come in and be a gift to the people. They get to receive it or not. So that's out of my control. I get to give this gift, but they get to choose whether they receive it. And then the final thing was standing there for a moment and going, me shrinking in this moment, getting nervous, doesn't serve them at all. It doesn't serve me, and it doesn't serve them. These companies want to grow. They need help with their messaging because I'd already looked at all their websites and everything, and I knew they were struggling a bit. And if I got up and was like, hey guys, I don't know, I'm glad to be here. I hope everybody likes this. No, that doesn't actually serve anybody well in that. What served them well is for me to stand in my authority as a guide, in my experience, in my education, in my tools that I was bringing to the table, because I paused for a moment and realized in this room, they may be stronger business people than me, but in this small sliver of space, nobody in the world is better at this than me. I am the smartest person in the room when it comes to this small space. So I needed to step into my authority. And I also needed to have some empathy for people in the room. They were terrified because they were brought in as big guys, and they were expected to grow these companies like crazy. And many of them didn't know how to do it. And so my job was to have some empathy for that, offer the gift, and then step into my authority versus backing down and being shy about what I was bringing to the table.
I feel like you built up the whole story. How did it go?
It went really well. By the end of it, everybody stayed through the whole thing, and I was able to, a number of them ended up hiring me afterwards, and they actually even invited me to stay for a much larger conference that was happening right after this meeting and kind of did a Q&A with me. So it ended up being the moment that I kind of, in my own space, like turned things around for myself. So instead of kind of leaning into the softy side of things and being gentle in that moment, I actually leaned into the badass side and leaned into my authority, because not just because it made me stronger, but it provided more value for the people that I was there to serve.
Is this a binary switch or is it a gradation?
Gradation. I would say it's a gradation. That's why I think of it like a dance. They work together and move, and one time one leads, one time another leads, but they work together versus being like, oh, you're just this or just this.
I'm going to try to unpack this question because it may come off as weird, but it's coming up a lot for nonprofits and leaders that are dealing with probably as hard as since pandemic or 2008 recession periods of time where the numbers look bad. Annual fundraiser is not meeting its goal. Charity, antiques, car show didn't support the numbers it could have. And now you're dancing with this reality of like, am I transparent about the numbers? Like, they're not dumb, but hey, here are the numbers. And you keep bringing that up and you're like, hey, we need to go get this, versus the ambition, which would be like, let's steamroll over this and find the next hill to take. Where and how do you find balancing the communication of in and around transparency of financial reality and that ambition? Because I do find those can be at odds when, frankly, your team is not winning. Hey, we're down by 17 goals. Game's going bad.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned before, some of the research shows that obviously transparency and vulnerability builds confidence in a team, but only to a certain level. The other research actually shows that people trust and follow confident leaders. This is kind of that dance. So I believe what you do when you show up in that space is, if you ignore the truth and do not acknowledge where things are, you will lose trust, because it will come across like you're hiding things. Also, in the story terms, you actually are now becoming the villain in the story because you're lying and you're hiding to protect yourself. So you have to start with honesty. If you don't bring that, you will not build trust on your team. However, then you need to develop a plan that actually moves forward. And in the communication terms, one of the things that I would recommend for people as they are creating plans, say in this Q4, like say where we haven't hit our numbers by the end of this year, or we're not on track to hit our numbers by the end of this year. You as a leader want to be honest about that and then go, here is the plan to move forward. The mistake people make in this is they throw out 50 different things that we're going to do in all these different directions. Leadership requires clarity. So I would pick 3 things. This comes from research on how people intake information. Choose 3 things. They can memorize 3 things. 3 allows for the greatest amount of engagement in the brain because our brain views 3 as holistic. So once you get to 5 or 6 different things you're offering people, the research shows that engagement drops at about, when you offer 5 things, by about 75%, and when you offer 6 things, drops by about 95%. So give your team 3 things that they need to focus on to move forward. Now, ultimately, you may do a bunch of stuff on social media. You may do this over here. That's fine. But when you're communicating the plan, the way that you show up in confidence for your team is narrow it down to 3 things they can be focusing on that will actually move the needle. So I think both of those things are what you have to show up with. First, honesty and vulnerability about where we are, the mistakes we've made, and the lessons we've learned. And then a clear path forward that involves 3 things that you're going to focus on to take the year over the top.
Yeah, I think that rule of 3 is so powerful and can help so many. Like, stop listening now, you got it. Like, please go edit, prune, kill anything over you must be these 3 things to ride the ride, and you lose after that. I actually try to come up with like one overarching theme every year. I just am like, one freaking thing. I want this thought in your head. And I'm like shopping around for the idea right now. I don't think the thing can be 3 things.
No, when you're kind of talking about themes, it really should be 1. This is what we're about this year. This is kind of our goal. We're going to achieve that with these 3 things, but this is our overall path that we're taking. Yeah.
All right. What theme ideas? Give me some theme ideas for 2026.
For next year. Well, for that, we might go to ChatGPT and we can just kind of throw it out there. But, I don't do anything cliche. I'll just tell you that. Don't do cliche.
Seriously, what a great piece of advice. I'm so sorry that making up some sort of like impactful for a cause. Like if it could be lifted and shifted and like pasted on to any sort of like fill in the blank organization, like help more people, like stop this.
Here's what I would say, honestly, like for those people who are thinking,
be the change you want to see in the world, JJ.
That's it. And that's so clear. Here's what I would actually say. As people are developing themes for next year, or when you're looking to communicate, one of the things that you do as a leader is rally your team around a cause. When teams can find a cause that is bigger than them, that they can work towards, that actually creates meaning in themselves. This goes back to some research that Viktor Frankl did, if you've heard of him. But the idea of that people are searching for meaning. And one of the ways that you find meaning is by joining a community of people who are working towards something that is bigger than themselves. Now, nonprofits in general kind of have a lot of that built in. However, when you're looking at specific themes, the more specific of stating the injustice you are going to solve or the problem you are going to solve this next year, the more people will be able to be on board with that theme. So instead of saying things like be the change you can see in the world, that's very vague. I don't know how to be that. I don't, all of those kind of things. But if I can say the problem is, and really almost start like with that, with the statement, the problem is there are the teenage homeless population is increased next year. So as a leader, you want to actually start with a very specific problem that you are going to be able to be a part of solving. Say the teen homeless population has increased by a certain percentage next year. We are going to own that problem, meaning then our theme for this year is decrease teen homelessness by 10% in the Denver metro area. So not this inspirational, like be the change or hope fuels or anything like that. Name a specific problem that you are going to be a part of solving. Then you can actually, once you then deliver your plan of how you're going to solve that, it becomes so important for people because they can attach their daily activities to the goals and ultimately kind of coming together to defeat this problem as a team. That will bring more meaning for your company, for your team, but also it gives you more focus on what the theme is supposed to be.
Yeah, I guess for me, that falls under the North Star goal setting and purpose. When it comes to theme, it's like there's a necessity for ambiguity sometimes in its overarching umbrella, but you're speaking to the effectiveness, and I know this in your work, of the clarity over clever, clarity over complexity, clarity over anything else you want to insert into the words I'm about to say, because when it's not there, you're pointing to these research, and like, you don't really need much research to understand that we have short attention spans, and to move us, it must be freaking clear first and then everything else. Is there any more you could maybe point to in this?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I was just working with a hospital group. They basically have multiple locations, and some of their leadership was in the room, and they were not really happy about having to miss part of a day to be a part of this workshop. So they were kind of pushing back on me.
Primed audience. I love walking into a nice chilly room.
What's so funny is, you're not going to hear stories about all the really good stuff. I'm only telling you those are the ones I remember, the hard things. But so I'm in this room, and they're kind of being like, we don't know why we're here. The president's told us to be here. And I was talking to them about clarity, and they were like, well, we need to be a bit more nuanced with it, and we need to do all these different things. We've already put on all this work to bring clarity and all these things. And I kind of realized it wasn't going anywhere. So I just paused for a second, and I said, all right, I need everybody's eyes on me right now. I want you to look right at me right now. I said, behind me to my right is your value statement. And there are 5 values on that wall. While you're still looking at me, I want somebody to tell me what those 5 values are. And there were 30 people in the room, and not a single person could tell me what those values were. And it was like think, heart, vision. It was just these very ambiguous words. And they're beautiful and creative. And they spent thousands of dollars over a weekend retreat coming up.
Willing to bet it was more than tens of
thousands. Yeah. And they did it as a retreat over a weekend, and they were really proud of it. And
you know how many Post-it notes died for those values? We lost a lot of good Post-it notes out there. So many.
And I just said, not a single one of you can name 5. And so I said, keep looking at me, name 3 of them. Can you name 3? They couldn't. Somebody could name 2.
Oof, there you go.
And I just paused, and I just go, okay, I don't want to get rid of those. Those are beautiful. You guys spend a lot of time on it. But what I want you to see is when you find these kind of big words that don't mean anything, that people can't really attach concrete ideas to, nobody will remember them, and nobody knows how they're supposed to live them out. So when you can actually own a problem that you solve, not only is that really clear in people's mind, but it attaches meaning to it. It rallies the team. It gives you a purpose. It gives you an injustice to fight against, and it actually moves the needle. So in this whole kind of, again, this Badass Softie world, it's what I'm talking about here is when you can actually lean into some clarity in your leadership, and you actually focus on like what you want to accomplish. It can still be filled with a ton of heart, but also it will actually move the needle. And those 2 things are what matter to me the most. Like, I love hugs, but hugs don't change the world in a lot of ways. So let's hug, but then let's get crap done.
What does it look like when someone is both ambitious but unclear?
Yeah, they don't move the needle. That's really what it comes down to. Like, if you are unclear about what you do, how you're doing it, how you help people, your team doesn't know. They can get excited. I won't name there's a specific football coach that relies a lot on charisma, and he's really good, and he's won a lot, but he's starting to, the cracks are starting to fall to show, because you can only just keep getting more and more excited for so long before it's like, well, now I have to get more excited. Okay, so now I'm going to take my shirt off and we get excited. Well, now I'm going to scream at the top of my lungs till my eyes bleed. You just kind of have to keep upping that charisma in order to keep people motivated. But if you have clarity, you actually give people an understanding of the why and the how of what they're going to do. One thing, I was working with a company who they said, we want to be the best software company in the world. Okay, well, first off, you're not going to be. I'll just tell you that right now. You're a very small company. You're never, like, they didn't actually have that ambition to be the best software company in the world. They just wanted to put it out there as a way of motivating their team. And they thought by putting this marker way out there, they would do it. What they actually did was cybersecurity. And I'm like, well, you're not. I mean, yes, you have software that are going to do that, but are you going to be the best software company in the world? That's ambitious, but it's not clear. So, what if we actually turned that around for your team to talk about people deserve this, or we want to make sure that this many companies are able to recover every, like, let's actually make it much more specific. Now I know as a team member what part I'm supposed to play in that story. But just saying we're going to be the best software company in the world, one, we all know that's not actually going to happen. And two, I don't know what part I play in that story because we do cybersecurity.
But I want to solve inequality for the world.
You do?
Every single person. We are here to fix poverty, full stop.
In the world.
We're poverty in the universe. But I want to pause for a second. This point is critical because I think the unapologetically ambitious leaves out your points and your work around clarity. Ambition without clarity puts you in a situation where you're out there with a matchbox and an ocean to try to heat up, and you're not even going to move that thing 1 degree. And you can throw all the ambition you want, but you're not going to heat that ocean. That's what global warming's for, JJ.
Yes.
Do you like to go by Dr. JJ?
I'm good with either. But here's just an example of somebody who I think does this really well is Scott Harrison from Charity Water. Right? Their goal.
You better be very careful. You're invoking. I'm sorry. You're about to throw a flag out here. You're invoking the most overused case study. So before our audience checks out, I know you're going to deliver, but the Charity Water case study, just be more like Charity Water. No. Now go.
That's not what I'm saying at all, because I do think, so this is one of those things where I do think Scott has leaned into his own specific superpowers, and I don't actually tell people to be like them. The piece that I want to bring into it is Scott is very honest about that their ambitious goal is basically to make sure everybody in the world has access to clean water. So that is an unapologetically ambitious goal. Now, they have broken that down by specific numbers and projects and years. And in fact, they had, I believe their year was that it was going to be by 2030, but now they've actually pushed it back to 2060, I believe. So they've actually pushed it back 30 years by, basically their numbers. So in essence, I'm not saying, and they are very successful. Now, you can argue a lot of different reasons why, but in reality, what I'm not saying, so when you say I want to end poverty, well, okay, let's just be really honest about that and what we mean by that and what the goals are and how we're going to do that. But just saying our goal is to end poverty, it doesn't work. But to bring some specific numbers to that, I think you would be more effective to say, we want to, reach these many kids by this year with these objectives. That is going to accomplish more in your world than just saying we want to eradicate poverty in the world.
Very fine point. It's fine to have the grand vision. It does inspire and it does clarify. But also, when you do invoke the C word, CW word, immediately in our minds is the specificity and visual of one freaking well at a time. And you're like, that is tangible, right? Yes. That is the specificity we're talking about. I want to go back to your sort of the optics of ambition. You can be ambitious internally, and some people have to dial that knob up, dial that knob down just internally for how you show up to work, because they're like all things, there are two sides of every coin. Right? There's two sides of the, I'm going to be servant leader. I'm going to show up with empathy. I'm going to give hugs. And there's two sides to that coin of taken to an extreme, as with ambition. I'm curious because I want you to unpack a bit more of leaders that feel like they are needing to outdo their last performance. The coach who's like, all right, now I need shinier sunglasses. I need a louder outfit. I need to bring a larger brass band than before. And I'm wondering if that sort of treadmill is a symptom of clarity and lack thereof.
Yes, in the sense that I think they're not necessarily clear about when you want to talk about throwing a flag. I'm going to use the phrase that I throw flags at all the time. It's that people
You
don't
get a
understand.
flag.
Yeah, I get a flag is you don't understand your why. I like, I understand that when people throw out like understand your why and all that stuff, it kind of bothers me sometimes. I think there's some things about it, but I do think that like if your goal, this is why going back to the what is the injustice you're fighting, what is the problem you're solving. So if you just want to do a bigger band and you want to feel better about yourself because you beat Tom next door or you beat yourself last year, I actually think
crushed him. I crushed this guy named Daryl. Didn't even see it coming.
Every time, that I think that will end up ringing hollow and it will create some bigger issues down the line. And you probably just need more therapy in that space. But the reality is that I think if you are actually going, okay, I want to accomplish this, the way that I'm going to accomplish solving this problem and defeating this injustice is with a bigger band and with bigger optics, then fantastic. I'm all about the method supporting the goals. But for me, again, it goes back to what injustice are you fighting? What problem are you solving? And this is for people who are in the nonprofit space. Sometimes that's a little bit easier, but even in the entrepreneurial space, like for me, I'm on the board of a number of nonprofits and I serve on those. I do a lot of fun with that. But what I actually do is help people lead with clarity in their messaging and marketing. So that is a for-profit business, and I still believe that I am what drives me is defeating the injustice of I believe the good people should have the microphones, that there's a lot of people who are doing good work out there. There's a lot of businesses that have products and services that really can solve a lot of problems for people, but they're not able to communicate it in a way that gets people engaged. That is the injustice that I fight. Now, how I do that, I have to think about. I'm one person right now, so how do I scale that? So I need to think about different products. So it's not just like, oh, I should start a mastermind for the sake of masterminds. No, but maybe I can scale to help more people with that by starting a mastermind. I want to do a podcast. Why do I do a podcast? Because it reaches more people. Also, it has the opportunity to not only reach a broader audience, but get me more clients that I can work more directly with. So having a podcast for the sake of podcast, not interesting to me. Starting a mastermind so I can be like other leaders, not interesting to me. But if that helps me scale the amount of people that I can work with to solve that problem and increase my reach to be able to help more people, that interests me. And I can also get other people involved in that as well. It's harder to just go, hey, work harder for me so that I can get bigger on a podcast. But if I invite my team to be a part of solving this injustice, they now are part of it as well and can help me grow even faster.
I want to pivot toward the sort of joke we had in passing with regard to let's just ask, ChatGPT for our theme, which I think many folks are starting to turn to this a little sycophantic companion out there. I have long said I don't believe that AI can automate empathy, and I think there are things that AI can do a heck of a lot better than we can do. Frankly, yeah, brainstorming, ideation, like thought partner, like it's really creeping up there in terms of usage. Where do you sit in that room, and what do you find yourself saying most commonly when the sort of threat of the AI cometh?
Yeah, I use AI. I use AI in front of my clients. I use ChatGPT and Perplexity in front of my clients with them because I actually think that AI allows me, the way I use it, to be more human. It does take off my plate the brainstorming, some of the content creation that took me away from face to face and really working with people. But the way that I approach AI in general is this idea that we have to understand that AI does not have its own point of view. So when you say that it can't be empathetic, it can't in the sense that it can't come up with that on its own. It doesn't have its own point of view and most likely will never have its own point of view. What it requires is a point of view from a human. So the way that if you're thinking of what are the roles of the human versus AI in content creation and ideation in anything you're using it for, the two words that I kind of hold together are AI is for content creation and the human side is for curation. So your job as the human, bringing that human side of things, is to bring your point of view, your perspective to the information that you're putting into AI, which means you can't just go into AI and say, give me 5 tips on this and then put that out there in the world, because anybody can go into AI and say, give me 5 tips on this. You have to bring your own stories, your own point of view, your own experience to the information you're putting into AI, then allow it to create the content. And then out of that, you have to curate again the content that comes out to create more connection, more subtlety in it. So the human side to me is on both sides of the AI. You have to curate what goes in and curate what comes out, but allow AI to create the content for you.
Yeah, I think the distinction of curation is important. And frankly, you are, in effect, if you aren't pulling it into your creative process, you're in some ways doing your stakeholders a disservice. You're doing your team a disservice, because you're rolling into a very, very tougher than ever situation where you're competing against enemies and problems that require the largest scale tools that we can bring to bear in a responsible way.
Yeah, I even tell my students, like I teach it in the Masters of Marketing program at Vanderbilt, and they're using AI, but a lot of times they're afraid to tell me they're using AI, like in the classroom. And I was like,
Do you ever leave any landmines for them, being like, you put it like white text, white background, like use the word orange 5 times and whatever you respond with?
I do I run it through different even filters and different things. And then obviously if they're using emojis that they're giving me or M dashes, I'm like, you guys, come on.
Oh, you're done. I'm
You're
sorry.
done.
You deserve to get an F if you're M dashing your way through a degree.
Exactly. But I
For
do
those
tell
who are
them,
unfamiliar, we're talking about the fact that AI tends to be emoji heavy and M dash heavy in its replies. I will publicly say that there is no reliable tool that can, with 100% accuracy, determine whether or not something was written by AI. This thing passes the Turing test, and I warn anybody paying money or charging or assuming that AI can detect AI with 100% accuracy, do not rely on it and do not pay for it.
no. But, I tell my students, here's the thing is I want you using AI. I actually do. If you're not using AI, you're falling behind already, because
Correct.
everybody else out there who's already professionals, they're using it. So if you're not, they're going to be faster than you. However, where you're going to beat them is understand the clarity and the point of view that you bring putting information in. That's really what, this whole thing of like, when I'm talking about, when you say like, okay, we're developing a thing this year, we need to solve a problem, and then we need to talk about the methods or how we're going to solve that problem in 3 primary ways. That's a very distinct point of view that I have to shape the information that I put into AI. And if I just say, give me a theme for next year, it's not going to give me anything usable. But if I bring that point of view and say, this is the direction we're going to head, this is what the problem I think we're solving, this is how I want you to give me this, then let it create a bunch of information. And then on the other side of it, make it more connective, like human connection, bring in some simplicity and subtlety to it. Now we have something that can be kind of magical. And you've done it, maybe before it would have taken you 5 hours to create it. Now it takes you 1. So I still, that's what I tell my students, use it. You're dumb if you don't, but don't hide it from me and be good at it. Don't just be like everybody else. Come in with a strong point of view.
I think the danger is far greater with not knowing what it's capable of. And in effect, then asking yourself a very tough question, which I come back to constantly, is what can I do that it cannot? And then how do I steer my company? How do I steer my team toward those things?
Yep. And this goes back to even just being like the vulnerability. Like if you are giving people stuff just directly out of Chat GPT or Perplexity and not actually doing anything with it, people are going to know and you're going to lose trust. To be very honest, like if I get an email from people that I can tell, just my 8-year-old can tell when stuff is developed by AI now. If I get stuff from that, I lose trust in people. Change it a little bit, at least make sure that you've at least seen it, but like actually bring something to the table.
Yeah, no, the human pattern recognition for this is incredible. The human brain is bad at many things. Pattern recognition is not one of them. It's
Yes.
phenomenal. Our ability to scan, analyze, and from some gut intuitive, we can tell based on the verbosity, sentence structure, and regularity of something. For instance, our ability, if I were to, in your mind, say, business person shaking hands, stock photo, I just implanted in you. You're like, nope, it's just a little too crisp.
Yep.
Just like, why is you just, I can't put my finger on it, but I know it. And we got that pattern recognition building up at a massive scale. I could talk to you forever. Final points as we move on, because I'm not going to do the rapid fire. You were just on. You'll probably be back on in 6 months, and we'll be talking about a new topic. It's fun to have you here. Badass Softie is the podcast. It seems like you're exploring these conversations at depth. How do people find you? How do people help you?
Yeah. Go to follow Badass Softie on Spotify or YouTube or Apple podcasts, wherever you listen. And then if you're interested in kind of walking through some of the things we even talked about today about kind of bringing a clear message to your team, to kind of your themes, any of that stuff, finding clarity in the way that you communicate your mission and leadership, you can go to drjjpeterson.com, which is drjjpeterson.com, and reach out to me there, and we can talk about what I might be able to do to help.
Great. Good time for planning in 2026. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I feel like you'll get a three-peat maybe next year with some new advice for us.
Let's do it.
Thank you.